Hello, and welcome to another episode of CTO Coffee Hour. Wow, almost botched that intro. Today, Dom and I are going to talk about some interesting ways that we found that they're benchmarking LLM models that if you're a business owner, you probably would take some interest in this. So, Dominic, how's it going?
Happy Tuesday. Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday.
It's always a good time for coffee.
Yeah.
Or Diet Dr. Pepper.
Dr. Pepper. CTO Diet Dr. Pepper Hour did not have the same ring to it.
And you might have trademark issues there over time. If this thing ever gets more than 0 to 3 viewers at any given time, and one of those happens to work for Dr. Pepper and Co.
We've been blowing up on our LinkedIn post, though. That one got 40K what's it called? Impressions. So you never know. So recently, I think one of my Discord mods posted this, that there was a benchmark for LLMs that was a game where you run a business. And so for those of you guys that don't know, LLMs are a type of AI model, and you basically have to test to see how good they do. And a lot of them train for the tests, which isn't, great. So that way they know how to pass the test and get really high scores in the test, but then they don't necessarily do great on other things. Well, this is an independent third party that started running these models through to see how they would do, basically using tool calls to play a video game simulating a food truck. And so
I'm assuming this game was a game before the models were. This game wasn't built as a game for the models. And you've destroyed my productivity in the last 3 or 4 hours because I have it open on this screen over here right now. And I made $41 profit yesterday. So bravo on me.
Nice. Okay. Well, it might have been the interface that you're playing with there. I assume was built for AI agents first, and then repurposed for humans, because it just screams rough UI design. This coming from a guy who's building a game with absolutely abysmal UI design currently. But I would think they built it for the models first. But either way, I mean, the mechanics of it are that you got to pick your location, you've got to pick the products you're going to sell, you've got to buy the ingredients for those products and decide how much you want, and you kind of decide
your prices.
Set prices. Yep, and then it kind of tells you how much foot traffic you're likely to get, and it tells you how much it's going to cost to be at this location, because you basically have to pay some amount of money to be at each location. And so you pick and choose. The LLMs or the human picks and chooses the location and says start day. You go through and you basically acquire a bunch of people that come and purchase it. So it tells you how much you made, and then you continue with that. So I found that to be pretty fascinating. And the interesting thing is a lot of them actually did very poorly on it. It was a very few of them that actually did well at all. By the way, this is foodtruckbench.com. If you want to go check it out, foodtruckbench.com. And it looks like Claude Opus. Actually, so out of 16 models I'm seeing here, basically only the top 4 or 5 really. Okay, the top 6 of them finished at this point. I think they updated this since just yesterday when I was looking at it. Now I'm very curious, because this yesterday it was actually different amounts, because now they've got 6 of them that have finished, but only the top 5 really have any amount of money in there. So Claude Opus, and Claude Sonnet being 2 of the tops, and ChatGPT 5.2. So Grok is down there.
Gemini's in there.
Yeah, Gemini made it in there, 3.1 Pro. So it's fascinating to watch and see. And as a business owner, I would be curious about this, because how would it, an LLM, run your business if you were to put it in charge of some part of it? Not that I'm recommending by any means.
But researching things, asking it questions, brainstorming. In fact, I've suggested to several people recently that are doing different things, whether it's starting businesses or looking for a job or things like this, that don't ask Chat GPT or Gemini or Claude the answers, but ask it questions to help you brainstorm what you think might be what you're trying to accomplish. And it, if you ask a fish to enter a marathon, it's not going to win. If you ask a snake to do the high jump, it's not going to win. So each model has its strengths and weaknesses in very much the same way. So I question that this one benchmark by itself.
Did you freeze? I think you froze. Well, either he froze or I froze or something.
Yeah,
Hope you back.
my connection's not so good. Here I am. So I guess my point is, like, different models are going to be trained and tuned and built different ways and have different strengths and weaknesses. So choosing a singular model based upon the food truck bench might not be that good.
Right.
Go.
And so to my knowledge, they have fine-tuned some models for coding, but I don't know of any LLMs that are specifically fine-tuned to run a business. And even if it was, there's so many different types of businesses and niches out there that you'd probably want one fine-tuned for your specific niche. Like, it would be interesting if someone fine-tuned a model specifically for food trucks. I'm not sure that would be that practical in real life, but it would be interesting to see.
In my, I don't have a spam folder per se, but I've got a junk mail, everything goes here. I call it 99% noise folder. I've been seeing a lot of people showing up in there with models that are very specially tuned. Now, I don't know what the base model is. I don't think they went from scratch, but very specially tuned for trading and investing. Because, of course, you can take mountains of data and put it in there. But if you take that and you intersect with perhaps the news and current events and other things, those two models together could be very well. Because I imagine who's probably going to have the best current news? Maybe Gemini, because Google has a Google News feed, which is very good in my opinion. And they're going to have lots of current events, but they may not have all of the historical financial data in there.
That's an interesting use case there.
Yeah. And what is that one called? No, I'm not going to promote somebody else's model, but I've seen lots of them out there that are doing AI specifically to do trading and investing ideas. So if you say, hey, I want to do some sort of option on one of these, give me the pros and cons based upon the current numbers.
And these were LLM models. They were text in, text out. Okay.
Correct.
Gotcha.
I use Gemini quite a bit for deciphering old cursive documents from the 16, 17, 1800s. I put a document in there, I say decipher it. And it used to be 6, 12, 18 months ago, I would do this. You could tell it was just hallucinating because it would have entirely wrong. It had seen a similar structured document, but you could tell that it was entirely wrong. Recently, they've been really good, particularly Gemini in thinking mode has been very good in deciphering old scripty sort of documents.
Gotcha. That's interesting. I'm just on a random note. I've also noticed they've gotten better at pixel art generation. So if you're generating something,
questions we're asking, huh?
Yeah. So it's, I was like, I always impressed it couldn't do it. And then now it's actually fairly decent at it. So there goes my doodles.
Well, I also use it. Like I went to a conference, for example, a couple Fridays ago, and it was live streamed, but it was 4.5 hours long, 100% in Italian. So first I asked it to summarize this 4.5 hours, because what it does is it goes to YouTube and it can pull the closed captioning for the 4.5 hours.
Right.
And then I asked it to translate that summary into English. And it does a beautiful job with things like that. Now, I'm biased. I tend to use Gemini more than Claude or GPT at this point. So the others may do well. But again, like this is an interesting benchmark, but much like when you're benchmarking a computer, they don't run it through a single test. They have a suite of 8 or 10 different benchmarks that they run it through to then give you an overall score. So I think you need to get a suite of benchmarks for these different tools to see their strengths and weaknesses. So one could be, generating an image. And now granted, it's going to do a tool call out to something else because an LLM isn't going to do that. But you could definitely come up with a suite of tasks, questions, quantifiable things
Mhm.
by which to judge these models more broadly than one specific food truck.
Well, and
Benchmark.
that's kind of getting back to where I started with this one is the models have, every time they come up with a new benchmark that anybody can brag about, the models immediately start training specifically for that benchmark. So I love to see new and creative third-party benchmarks like this one
Mhm.
here that would be slightly more difficult to train with. Like you'd have to get the source code and then,
Mhm.
and or replicate this in some, in some way. And so to train for it specifically and then run it a million times. But in this one, it's probably something people didn't think about. And I think we're going to
Mhm.
come up with more creative and unique ones that really kind of tests the flexibility of these models. Because, if you train for just the test, if for just the benchmark, then and you give them
Mhm.
something that it hasn't been trained on, it's not that good. And this like gives us a more accurate picture of how these things perform.
I mean, yeah, it's almost like here's the test. Remember everything. Now I'm going to test you again.
Hmm.
I just did a Google search for LLM benchmark suite, and there is plenty of them out there. There's actually looks like an interesting one on GitHub. So if you actually wanted to go tweak your own LLMs or benchmarks, you could probably do it there. But there is no shortage of them: reasoning average, coding average, mathematics, data analysis, etc. So there are others out there, and it looks like Claude is kind of the top of all of this one. Anyways, yeah, but it also depends what's your use case, right? Are you going to do financial analysis? Are you going to do coding analysis? Are you going what is your use case? And then can you yourself come up with some sort of test? Let's say, pixel art's a tough one because it's not an LLM question, right? They're
No.
handing that off to something else. But um, my scripts, for example, I could perhaps take 10 of these old documents, have a professional read them, translate them, et cetera, then feed them into each of the LLMs and score the accuracy, the number of words correct or incorrect on each number of those. And that would be a much more valid and accurate benchmark for what I would use an LLM for in this
Yeah.
particular use case.
It, and just a random thought, I was on a mastermind earlier today, and we came up with a business model where we were like, we can't outcompete the big guys on on general knowledge, but if you niche down and you found like a business niche that you could fine tune an LLM for, that you could run a smaller model, without
Mhm.
spending as much money on GPUs, you could still compete theoretically because your LLM will likely be more accurate within your
Mhm.
wheelhouse of use case. And then again, smaller model,
Yep.
cheaper, so you can compete on costs there too against the bigger guys. So that was an
So
interesting
when I
thought
was
there.
working in the insurance industry, and this is in the like before LLMs, before AI became a household term, there was two that actually the company was proof of concepting, let's say. One specifically looking at contracts and contract terms because I mean when you get a homeowner's policy for your house, it's boilerplate. But when you're talking to big businesses, each one of those contracts is custom. So they wanted to be able to take all of the competitors or competitions policies and contracts to enter them into this LLM or this AI tool such that it would identify the strengths and weaknesses between all of the different policies. There was another one that was doing much more numerical analysis, what is it, actuarial table sort of analysis to look for opportunities within pricing opportunities, I guess.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
then we also know somebody in Madison who's doing this. I believe it's with mortgages that they're doing it, an LLM that's specifically around writing mortgages and things like that.
Interesting. I know that some of the insurance companies are getting into trouble, or maybe it was lending companies. They put classifiers on to get to speed up the lending process, say good,
Mm.
you're good for it or not. And it seems to have backfired on them. So I don't have that
Mm.
story in front of me,
Uh,
but
One of the big problems with using, at least when I was involved, and this has been several years, of using I'll just say machine learning models. I don't want to just say LLM, but machine learning models within the insurance pricing is some states commissioners, I believe Iowa in particular was one of them, require you to be able to justify how you came up with a price for a customer. And with the black box machine learning model, you could not justify it. Therefore, you cannot use the model per se to do pricing.
Interesting. Yeah.
Because you don't want biases such as race.
I can imagine.
Quite honestly, becoming an issue.
Yeah. Well,
and the LLM might.
You probably shouldn't be feeding it that data to start with, but yeah.
True, but there may be ways it can come up with decisions that you could that could become a problem. I don't know quite the right way to say it.
No, I got you. All right. Interesting.
You needed to have interpretability, and that's something that I believe has gotten a lot better in the last probably 5 years since I was in that industry. But yeah, before it was just a black box saying, here's our math, here's our matrix. This is how we came up with our numbers. It's not an acceptable justification for what you charge somebody in the insurance industry.
Interesting. We're going all over the place here. I'm gonna wrap up with just a funny story. So I had to get a lawyer for a personal reason, unrelated to business recently. So it's not my normal attorney, and they said, listen, if you ever need to amend this thing, you can just slap it in ChatGPT and it'll pump out whatever you need to do the amendment. I'm like, you were talking yourself out of a job. You were creating your own demise here. I guess you're close to retirement age and you're feeling pretty good about it, but I was like, oh my goodness. And then I got to thinking, did he just pop this thing through chat? It was like a 30-page document. Did you actually read this? So we went through it line by line, but
I could see if somebody had thousands of examples of service provider contracts and you're a relatively simple small business that needs a moderately reasonable level of protection in your contract. You're not a multi-million or multi-billion-dollar company. You're a small sub 5-person company and you need just a basic contract with basic defenses built in around your business. I think if you had a custom trained LLM, it would actually do a remarkably good job in writing that base level standard contract. If you say, here's my business, here's the risks, here's the things I want to protect myself against. If inflation hits, I have to deal with currency risk. The euro dollar 15% change in the last year. So those things are now in a contract. If I could put all of this into a specially trained LLM, I bet you would produce a pretty darn good contract.
But let me play the flip side of that. What are the chances a judge is going to throw that out because an LLM wrote it and you couldn't justify this or that about it? Just like your other scenario. That'd be interesting. I don't know if that's going to happen.
I don't know if a judge would throw out a contract if it was written from an LLM that had been trained on tens of thousands of legitimate contracts.
Yeah, possibly. I don't know. It's interesting. My particular scenario, contracts can get thrown out if both parties don't have counsel before signing it, and so in that case, do you count an LLM as counsel? I don't know, just random sci-fi thing here.
Well, do I actually need counsel to write a contract? Can I not do it myself?
To sign a contract?
Well, do I need a lawyer to sign a contract?
No, not necessarily. But in some cases, mine in particular, I'm not going to go into detail there. But you actually, in Wisconsin law, if you don't have counsel, there's a much bigger probability that contract gets thrown out if both parties.
I could see in that use case because there could be deception or fraud involved. I see how that could be. That could be.
Yeah. So again.
Or manipulation, perhaps, as well might occur. Yeah, so
exactly. So, nope. All right. Well, with that said, I think we're going to start wrapping up. We went all over the place. I was going to talk mainly about benchmarking, but check out foodtruckbench.com if you're at all interested. If you like other games, go to schematical.com/game. And we finally turned a curve where Tech Debt the game actually feels much more like a game and less like a AWS simulation software. So we're making good progress on that. If you need help keeping your infrastructure up and running on AWS in a cost-effective and secure manner, feel free to reach out to us again at schematical.com. And I think that's it. Am I forgetting anything down?
What's your tagline again?
We help CTOs running on AWS sleep at night. So,
cheers.
Cheers.